My name is Nancy Wilson, and at 23, I never imagined I'd already raised 6 children without giving birth to any of them. When Mom announced her 7th pregnancy over our weekly family dinner, something inside me finally snapped. After years of sacrificing my education, career, and social life to be her unpaid nanny, I decided enough was enough. I had no idea my attempt to claim my independence would end with police sirens outside our family home. Before I continue my story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe for more real-life dramas. I grew up in Millfield, Georgia, a town so small you could drive through it without realizing you'd been there. My mother Diane was only 19 when she had me, and my father Harold was 22. They were high school sweethearts who got married right after graduation. Dad worked at the local paper mill while Mom stayed home with me. Those early years were simple but happy. When I was 5, Mom gave birth to my half-sister Audrey. By then, my parents' marriage had started showing cracks. Dad worked longer hours, and Mom often seemed frustrated and lonely. 2 years later came Travis and then Laura when I was 10. I didn't fully understand at the time, but Dad wasn't the biological father of my siblings. Mom had gotten involved with a man named Carl who disappeared before Laura was even born. Despite the complicated situation, Dad loved us all equally. He never treated Audrey, Travis, or Laura any differently than me. He coached Travis's Little League team, attended Audrey's dance recitals, and read bedtime stories to Laura every night. When I was 12, Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Within 6 months, he was gone. That's when everything changed. Mom fell apart completely. I still remember holding Laura, who was only 2 at the time, while Mom locked herself in her bedroom for days. At 12 years old, I stepped up because someone had to. I learned to make simple meals, help my siblings with homework, and keep the house from falling into complete chaos. Mom eventually pulled herself together enough to function, but something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. I had become the second parent. Mom started working at the local diner, often taking double shifts to make ends meet. I became responsible for getting everyone ready for school, making dinner, and handling bedtime routines. 2 years after Dad died, Mom met Frank Thompson at the diner. He was 43 at the time, divorced with no children, and worked as a sales manager at a car dealership in the next town over. They got married just 6 months after meeting. I was 14 and hopeful that things might get easier with another adult in the house. At first, Frank seemed like he might be a good stepfather. He bought us ice cream, took us to the movies, and made Mom smile again. But once they were married and he moved into our house, the novelty of instant fatherhood quickly wore off. Frank preferred watching football on weekends to attending school plays or helping with homework. When Mom announced she was pregnant with Jackson, Frank seemed pleased but distant. By the time Jackson was born, Frank had settled into a pattern of coming home late from work, eating dinner, and retreating to his recliner with a beer. Mom was busy with the new baby, so I naturally took on more responsibility with my siblings. 2 years later, Hazel arrived, and then Ruby 2 years after that. Each new baby meant more work, more chaos, and more responsibility falling on my shoulders. By the time Ruby was born, I was 18 and should have been preparing for college. I had good grades and had even received a partial scholarship to Georgia State University. But Mom panicked at the thought of managing without me. "Just take a year off," she said. "Help me get settled with the baby, and then you can go." 1 year turned into 2, then 3, and here I was at 23, still at home, still the primary caretaker for my siblings. I managed to get a part-time job at the local library and took some online courses, but my dreams of becoming a teacher seemed to be slipping further away with each passing year. My best friend Kimberly had graduated college and moved to Atlanta. We stayed in touch, but every time we talked, the gap between our lives grew wider. "You know this isn't normal, right?" Kimberly would say during our phone calls. "Parents are supposed to raise their own kids." I knew she was right, but what choice did I have? Mom had perfected the art of disappearing whenever things got challenging. "I just need some me time," she would announce, grabbing her purse and leaving me with 6 children to feed, bathe, and put to bed. Frank was physically present more often, but mentally checked out. His standard response to any request for help was, "Ask your mother, or Nancy can handle it." I tried talking to Mom several times about sharing responsibilities more fairly. I need to start my own life, I told her once. She looked at me as if I'd suggested abandoning the children in the woods. These are your brothers and sisters, she said. Family helps family. My mother helped raise me and my siblings. That's just how it works. The comparison was hardly fair. My grandmother had occasionally babysit, not served as a full-time, unpaid nanny, while her daughter checked out of parenting. But pointing this out only led to arguments that resolved nothing. So I continued the exhausting routine, waking at 5:30 to get myself ready before rousing the kids, making breakfast for 7 people, getting everyone dressed and off to school or daycare, working my shift at the library, picking up the younger ones from daycare, helping with homework, preparing dinner, overseeing baths, reading bedtime stories, and collapsing into bed to do it all again the next day. I loved my siblings fiercely. Audrey, now 17, was becoming a thoughtful young woman with a talent for art. Travis, 15, was brilliant with computers and could fix almost anything electronic. Laura, 13, was a bookworm like me and often my greatest helper with the younger kids. Jackson, at 8, was all energy and jokes. Hazel, at 6, was our dreamy ballerina, and Ruby, at 4, was sweet and affectionate but demanded constant attention. They weren't the problem. They were just kids who needed love, guidance, and stability. The problem was that I had sacrificed my own development to provide those things because the adults who should have been providing them weren't stepping up. And despite my growing resentment, I couldn't see a way out that wouldn't hurt the people I loved most. Sunday dinners were a Wilson-Thompson family tradition. Mom insisted everyone be present, which meant I spent Sunday mornings cooking a roast or casserole large enough to feed 9 people. That particular Sunday seemed no different from any other. Frank watched football in the living room, while Mom supervised the table setting, which really meant directing me and Audrey while she scrolled through social media on her phone. Make sure the good napkins are folded properly, she instructed as I juggled, placing serving dishes and keeping Ruby from pulling the tablecloth off. Dinner proceeded as usual, with Jackson and Travis arguing about whose turn it was to use the family tablet later. Laura quietly reading a book under the table, and Hazel chattering about her upcoming dance recital. Mom picked at her food and seemed distracted while Frank asked for seconds before most of us had taken our first bites. It wasn't until dessert time, as I was serving the apple pie I'd baked that morning, that Mom clinked her water glass with a spoon. Everyone, I have an announcement, she said, her face glowing with excitement. Frank and I are expecting a baby. You're all going to have a new little brother or sister in about 7 months. The table erupted in various reactions. Frank looked surprised but pleased, patting Mom's hand affectionately for the first time in months. Jackson jumped up and down, asking if he could teach the baby to play video games. Hazel clapped her hands and declared she wanted a sister, while Ruby, not fully understanding, announced that she would share her stuffed animals. Laura glanced at me with a concerned expression, and Travis muttered something under his breath that made Audrey elbow him. I stood frozen pie server in hand as the room seemed to tilt around me. 7 months, another baby. 5 more years of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and preschool drama before this one would even start kindergarten. 5 more years added to my sentence. Nancy, aren't you excited? Mom asked, noticing my silence. I forced my face into what I hoped resembled a smile. Congratulations, I managed to say, setting down the pie server before my shaking hands dropped it. That's wonderful news. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I mechanically served dessert, cleaned up dishes, and supervised toothbrushing and pajamas while my mind raced. I kept remembering what Mom had said after Ruby was born. This is definitely the last one. Our family is complete now. I had held on to that promise through countless exhausting days, telling myself I just needed to hold on until Ruby started school and then I could finally focus on my own life. That night, after everyone was in bed, Audrey knocked softly on my bedroom door. Are you okay? She asked, sitting beside me on my bed. At 17, she was perceptive and mature beyond her years, partly because she'd had to be. Not really, I admitted. It was a relief to be honest with someone. I love you all, but I can't do this anymore, Audrey. I can't raise another baby. She nodded, twisting her long brown hair around her finger the way she did when she was thinking. You shouldn't have to. It's not fair what they expect from you. What choice do I have? I can't just abandon you guys. We're not babies anymore, Audrey pointed out. I'm practically an adult. Travis and Laura are old enough to help more, and Mom and Frank, they're the actual parents. They need to step up. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake thinking about the job offer I'd received last month from Paula Jensen, the owner of a bookstore in Atlanta. I'd met her when she visited our library for a regional booksellers conference. We'd hit it off, and she'd mentioned she was looking for a manager for her store. "You've got a good head for business and you know books," she'd said. "Think about it." I had politely declined explaining that my family needed me. Paula had given me her card anyway. "The offer stands if your situation changes," she'd said. At 3 a.m, I texted Kimberly, "Need your advice. Can I call tomorrow?" She responded immediately despite the hour, "Always. Everything okay?" The next morning, Mom was unusually cheerful as she drank her decaf coffee. "Nancy, I was thinking we should convert part of the garage into a nursery. The house is already so full, and you're so good at organizing these things." And there it was, the assumption that I would handle everything without even a pretense of asking. Something hardened inside me. "I'll think about it," I said noncommittally, handing Ruby her breakfast and checking Travis's backpack for his homework. During my lunch break at the library, I called Kimberly. "Mom's pregnant again," I said without preamble. "Oh God," Kimberly replied. "And let me guess, you're expected to be the live-in nanny for this one too?" "She's already talking about me setting up the nursery." "Nancy, this is insane. You need to get out of there." "And go where? Do what? My whole life is taking care of them." "That's the problem," Kimberly said firmly. "Your life hasn't even started yet. Look, my roommate just moved out. I have a spare bedroom. Come to Atlanta." "I can't just leave." "Why not? You're 23. Your siblings have 2 parents. It's time for them to step up." The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Could I really do it? Just leave? "The bookstore job," I said slowly, "the one Paula offered me. Do you think it might still be available?" "Only one way to find out," Kimberly replied. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. A way out that had seemed impossible suddenly felt within reach. The guilt was overwhelming, but so was the desire for freedom. I thought about my siblings, especially the younger ones who depended on me so completely. But then I thought about Audrey's words. They're the actual parents. They need to step up. Maybe it was time I forced them to do exactly that. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, I locked myself in my room and called Paula Jensen. My hand trembled as I dialed her number from the business card I'd kept tucked in my wallet. "Nancy Wilson." "What a pleasant surprise," Paula answered warmly. "Hi, Paula. I'm calling about that job offer. Is it still available?" As a matter of fact, it is. My current manager is leaving in 2 weeks. The timing would be perfect if you're interested. My heart raced. I am. Very interested. We discussed salary hours and when I could start. The pay was better than my library position. And Paula mentioned there was a community college nearby where I could take evening classes if I wanted to continue my education. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and researched apartments in Atlanta, but the prices made me wince. Sharing with Kimberly was clearly my best option for now. Next, I checked the class schedule at Atlanta Metropolitan State College. They offered night classes in education, the degree I'd always wanted to pursue. I created a spreadsheet of my savings, which were modest but enough for a security deposit and first month's rent if Kimberly and I split costs. I calculated a budget for life in Atlanta, including transportation, since I'd need to leave my old car for Audrey to use. Things would be tight, but doable. The following Saturday, I told Mom I needed to run errands in the city and drove to Atlanta to see Kimberly's apartment. It was small but clean with a tiny second bedroom that would be mine. The neighborhood wasn't fancy, but seemed safe enough, and most importantly, it was walking distance from the bookstore, where I would work. "This could really happen," I said to Kimberly as we sat in her kitchen drinking coffee. "It should happen," she corrected me. "You deserve a life of your own." On the drive back to Millfield, I struggled with overwhelming guilt. That evening, I took Jackson, Hazel, and Ruby shopping for school supplies, watching them excitedly choose folders and pencil cases. Who would do this for them if I wasn't here? Who would remember that Hazel needed the purple scissors because regular ones hurt her fingers, or that Jackson lost every pencil case that didn't attach to his binder, or that I needed extra tissues because of her allergies. I was so distracted that I didn't notice Audrey had found my Atlanta research until she confronted me in the laundry room on Sunday. "You're planning to move out," she said. It wasn't a question. I froze a wet sheet halfway to the dryer. "Audrey, don't deny it. I saw your browser history when I borrowed your laptop. Atlanta, apartments, job listings, community college." I slumped against the washing machine. "I was going to tell you. When after you were already gone." Her voice was sharp, but her eyes showed hurt rather than anger. "No, of course not. I just needed to figure things out first. See if it was even possible. And is it?" I nodded slowly. "Paula offered me the bookstore job. Kimberly has a room for me. I could start classes in the spring semester." I expected her to argue or guilt trip me, but instead Audrey surprised me by pulling me into a tight hug. "Good," she said fiercely. "You should go." I pulled back to look at her. "But what about everyone? What about you?" "I'll be fine. I'm almost 18, and I'll help with the others." She straightened her shoulders. "Mom and Frank need to step up. Maybe this is what it will take to make them realize they can't keep dumping everything on you. But the little ones, we'll adjust. We'll figure it out, and you'll still see them right. You're moving to Atlanta, not Australia." Tears filled my eyes. Of course I'll still see them, as often as I can. Then it settled. "When are you leaving?" 2 weeks. Paula needs me to start when her current manager leaves." Audrey nodded decisively. "Then we have 2 weeks to prepare. I need you to teach me all your systems so I can keep things running until Mom and Frank get their act together." Over the next few days, I began preparing in earnest. I packed boxes when no one was home and stored them in my car's trunk. I created detailed guides for each child's routine preferences and needs. I wrote out the family schedule, complete with color coding for who needed to be where and when. I made a recipe book of simple meals that even Frank could manage. I also wrote letters to each of my younger siblings explaining in age-appropriate ways that I was moving to Atlanta but would still see them often and would always be available by phone. For Ruby, I recorded videos of me reading her favorite bedtime stories. One night, I found myself sitting on my bed, surrounded by family photos, tears streaming down my face. There was Jackson on his first day of kindergarten, his toothless grin wide with excitement. Hazel at her first dance recital, tutu slightly askew. Ruby taking her first steps, reaching for me instead of Mom. So many memories, so many moments where I had been the one constant in their lives. I picked up my phone and called my grandmother, Marie, Mom's mother, who lived in Florida now. "Nancy, sweetheart," she answered warmly. "What a lovely surprise." "Grandma, I need your advice." My voice broke as I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, then sighed deeply. "Your mother has always taken the easy way out. Even as a child, she let others clean up her messes. So you think I'm wrong to leave?" "No, darling. I think you're finally doing what's right for you. It's long overdue. They'll manage without you because they'll have to. And it might be the wake-up call your mother needs." Her approval lifted a weight from my shoulders. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Of course you are. Change is always scary. But staying stuck in a situation that's slowly killing your spirit is scarier." We talked for almost an hour, her wise words giving me strength. Before hanging up, she promised to visit me in Atlanta soon. The next day, I transferred most of my savings to a new bank account my mother couldn't access. I confirmed my start date with Paula and finalized arrangements with Kimberly. I was really doing this. Mom had noticed my distracted behavior but attributed it to what she called my monthly mood swings. Frank was too preoccupied with a big sale at the dealership to notice anything different. Only Travis gave me curious looks, especially when he caught me taking framed photos from the walls to pack. At dinner that Friday, Frank made a joke that crystallized my resolve completely. "Well, at least with a new baby, we'll have another pair of helping hands in the house in a few years," he said, chuckling as he reached for more potatoes. I looked around the table at my mother, who nodded in agreement at my siblings eating quietly at the life that had been carved out for me without my consent. And I knew with absolute certainty that I was making the right choice. That Sunday would be my last family dinner in this house as a resident. Monday morning, I would tell them I was leaving. By Wednesday, I would be in Atlanta, starting my new life. I just had to get through the next 48 hours without breaking down or giving away my plans. I checked my packed boxes one last time, confirming I had everything essential. Clothes, important documents, sentimental items, and the laptop I'd saved up to buy myself last year. Audrey had helped me develop a script for what I would say. Travis had figured out what was happening and silently squeezed my hand at breakfast, his way of showing support. I was as ready as I'd ever be for the confrontation to come. Monday morning arrived with a knot of anxiety in my stomach so tight I could barely eat. I'd been up since 5 rehearsing what I would say. The house was quiet at 6:30, but by 7 the usual morning chaos had begun. Jackson couldn't find his science project. Hazel was crying because her favorite leggings were in the laundry. Ruby wanted me to braid her hair like Elsa. I handled each crisis automatically, the routines so ingrained I could do them while my mind raced with anxiety about what was to come. By 7:45, the older kids had left for school and Frank was getting ready for work. Mom sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, while Ruby played with cereal at her feet. This was it, the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. "Mom, Frank, I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Can it wait?" Frank asked, adjusting his tie. "I've got a meeting at 8:30. "No, it can't wait." I took a deep breath. "I'm moving to Atlanta. I've been offered a job at a bookstore there, and I'm taking it. I leave on Wednesday." The kitchen fell silent. Mom slowly lowered her phone, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "I'm moving out. I've accepted a job in Atlanta. I start this week." Frank frowned. "Is this some kind of joke?" I've made arrangements. Kimberly has a room for me. I'll be managing a bookstore and taking night classes." Mom's face had turned pale. "You can't just leave. What about the children? What about the baby coming?" "They're your children," I said firmly. "Your responsibility, not mine. I've put my life on hold for years to help raise them, but I can't do it anymore. I need to start living my own life." Frank seemed more annoyed than upset. "This is ridiculous. You can't just announce something like this and expect us to rearrange everything in 2 days. I've left detailed instructions for all the kids' routines. Audrey knows the systems and can help during the transition. But ultimately, you two are the parents. It's time you started acting like it." Mom's shock was morphing into anger. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me, by abandoning your family when we need you most." "What exactly have you done for me, Mom?" "You've expected me to be a third parent since I was 12 years old. I haven't had a normal teenage life or young adulthood because I've been too busy raising your children. That's what family does," she snapped. "We help each other." "No, that's what you've convinced yourself to justify taking advantage of me. I love my siblings, but they're not my responsibility. They're yours." Frank put his briefcase down, finally seeming to realize this was serious. "Nancy, be reasonable. Your mother is pregnant. This is hardly the time to be selfish." "Selfish?" I laughed incredulously. "Is that what you call wanting a basic education and a job? Things most people my age take for granted. I've put everyone else first for over a decade. For once, I'm putting myself first." Mom switched tactics, her eyes filling with tears. "Please, Nancy. We need you. The children need you. They'll be heartbroken." "Don't use them to manipulate me," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "They'll adjust, and I'll still see them regularly. I'm moving to Atlanta, not disappearing forever." "How will we manage without you?" she cried. "I can't handle everything alone, especially with the baby coming." "You won't be alone. You have a husband." I looked pointedly at Frank. "And you've managed to have 6 children, so clearly you felt capable of parenting. It's time to actually do it." Frank attempted to mediate. "Look, maybe we can work something out. You could take some classes locally, get a better job here in town. We could pay you something for helping with the kids." "This isn't a negotiation," I said firmly. "I'm not looking for better terms in the same arrangement. I'm creating a new life for myself. My mind is made up." Mom's tears turned to fury. Fine. If you leave, don't bother coming back. You're choosing yourself over your family, and that's unforgivable. Her words cut deep, but I stood my ground. I'm choosing to have a life of my own, something you've never allowed me to have. And if you can't understand that, then that's your problem, not mine. I turned and walked to my room, hands shaking as I closed the door behind me. I could hear Mom crying dramatically in the kitchen, while Frank attempted to calm her down. Part of me wanted to go back to apologize, to slip back into the comfortable role of family caretaker. But a stronger part knew this was my only chance at freedom. I finished packing the last of my things and carried the boxes to my car. Mom watched from the window, her expression a mixture of betrayal and disbelief. Frank had already left for work, muttering something about dealing with this later. By the time the younger kids got home from school, the house was in chaos. Mom had called in sick to work and spent the day alternating between crying and trying to guilt me into staying. Ruby ran to me as soon as she saw my partially emptied room. "Are you going on a trip?" she asked innocently. I knelt down to her level. "Sort of, sweetie. I'm moving to a new place in Atlanta. But I'll visit often and we can talk on the phone every day if you want." Her lower lip trembled. "But who will read me stories?" "Mommy and Daddy will. And Audrey and Travis and Laura. And I'll record special stories just for you." Jackson and Hazel were more difficult to explain things to. Jackson accused me of not loving them anymore, while Hazel simply clung to my leg and refused to let go. Travis helped pry her off, gently whispering, "I understand," as he passed me in the hallway. By evening, most of my belongings were packed in my car. I planned to leave early the next morning to avoid another emotional scene. Mom had retreated to her bedroom, refusing to speak to me. Frank had come home and attempted a half-hearted guilt trip before giving up and turning on the television. Audrey helped me carry the last box to my car. "Call me when you get there," she said, hugging me tightly. "And don't feel guilty. This is right." That night, I barely slept. I could hear Ruby crying in her room, and it took every ounce of willpower not to go comfort her. But I knew if I did, I might never leave. At 6 the next morning, I quietly carried my last bag to the car. The house was still dark and quiet, but as I opened the front door, I found Ruby sitting on the steps in her pajamas, clutching her favorite stuffed unicorn. "Don't go," she whimpered, reaching for me. I felt my resolve crumbling as I knelt beside her. "I have to, sweetie, but I promise I'll see you soon." She wrapped her small arms around my neck, sobbing. I held her, my own tears falling freely now. Travis appeared in the hallway, gently peeling Ruby away. "Go," he said quietly. "I've got her." With one last look at the house that had been both my prison and my home, I got in my car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see Mom had come outside and was standing in the driveway in her bathrobe, yelling something I couldn't hear. The sight made me press the accelerator harder. 2.5 hours later, I pulled up outside Kimberly's apartment building in Atlanta. The moment I stepped out of my car, I felt a wave of something unfamiliar: freedom. Despite the tears still drying on my cheeks, despite the ache in my heart for the children I'd left behind, there was also an undeniable sense of liberation. Kimberly was waiting for me, arms open wide. "Welcome to your new life," she said as she hugged me. That first night in Atlanta was a strange mixture of emotions. Relief, guilt, excitement, fear. I missed the kids terribly, but reveled in the quiet of the apartment. No one needed a snack or help with homework or a bandage for a skinned knee. I could just be. Mom had called 17 times and left a series of increasingly manipulative voicemails. "Ruby won't stop crying. Jackson is acting out at school. How could you do this to us?" I finally turned off my phone, needing a break from the emotional onslaught. I went to bed early, exhausted from the emotional turmoil of the day. For the first time in years, I had no responsibilities to anyone but myself. No one would wake me up at midnight needing water or comfort after a bad dream. No one would need breakfast prepared at 6 in the morning. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and hope. I was finally free to build my own life, but the cost of that freedom was higher than I had anticipated. I woke the next morning to loud knocking on Kimberly's apartment door. Disoriented, I checked the time, 7:15. Kimberly had already left for her job at the marketing firm, so I stumbled out of bed and peered through the peephole. Two police officers stood in the hallway. My heart leapt into my throat. Had something happened to one of the kids? I opened the door still in my pajamas. Yes, is everything okay? Are you Nancy Wilson? Asked the taller officer, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair. Yes, that's me. I'm Officer Daniels, and this is Officer Ramirez. We'd like to ask you some questions about some items reported stolen from the Wilson Thompson residence in Millfield. I stared at them in confusion. Stolen, I don't understand. We received a report that you removed property that doesn't belong to you when you left your parents' home yesterday. A laptop computer, a mobile phone, jewelry, and other valuable items. The realization hit me like a bucket of cold water. My mother had called the police on me. She had accused me of theft. Those are my belongings, I said, my voice shaking with indignation. I bought the laptop with my own money from working at the library. The phone is on my own plan that I pay for. And I don't have any jewelry except my grandmother's necklace that she gave me for my 18th birthday. Officer Ramirez, a younger woman with a kind face, studied me carefully. May we come in to discuss this further? I stepped aside to let them enter the small apartment, acutely aware of the boxes still piled in the living room and my disheveled appearance. I just moved in yesterday, I explained, gesturing to the chaos. My friend Kimberly is letting me stay here while I get established. And why did you leave your family home? Officer Daniels asked, notebook in hand. I took a deep breath and explained the situation, my role as unpaid nanny to my siblings for the past decade, my mother's latest pregnancy announcement, and my decision to finally start my own life. Everything I brought with me belongs to me, I insisted. I was very careful about that. Your mother claims you took a family laptop that was purchased for homeschooling the children, Officer Daniels said. That's not true. That laptop is still at the house. I left it on the desk in the family room. The one I brought is mine. I can show you the receipt. I dug through a folder of important documents and produced the receipt from when I'd purchased my laptop the previous year. Officer Ramirez examined it. And the jewelry she mentioned. The only jewelry I own is this, I said, touching the small gold locket around my neck. It was a gift from my grandmother. The officers exchanged glances. Officer Ramirez's expression had softened considerably. This seems like a family dispute rather than a criminal matter, she said gently. Do you have anyone who can verify that these items belong to you? My sister Audrey knows everything I own, and Kimberly, my roommate, knows I've had this laptop for over a year. Also, my grandmother Marie can confirm she gave me this necklace. Officer Daniels nodded. We'll need to follow up with them. In situations like this, it's helpful to document everything. Make a list of all the items you brought with you and take photos. I can't believe she would do this, I said, my voice breaking. She's trying to force me to come back. Officer Ramirez gave me a sympathetic look. We see this kind of thing more often than you might think. Family dynamics can get complicated. They asked me to call my mother with them present. With shaking hands, I dialed her number and put the phone on speaker. Mom answered immediately. Nancy, are you coming home? The kids miss you terribly. Mom, I'm here with 2 police officers. They say you reported me for theft. Well, you took things that weren't yours, she said defensively. That laptop cost nearly $1,000 and it belongs to the family. Mom, that's not true. My laptop is mine. I bought it with my own money. The family laptop is still at the house. What about the jewelry? Those pieces were meant to be shared among all the girls. What jewelry, Mom? The only jewelry I have is Grandma's locket. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Well, some things are missing, and you left so suddenly. Officer Daniels leaned toward the phone. Mrs. Thompson, this is Officer Daniels with the Atlanta Police Department. Based on our conversation with your daughter and the documentation she's provided, this appears to be a family disagreement rather than a criminal matter. I suggest you inventory your home carefully to locate the items you believe are missing. Mom's voice turned shrill. So you're taking her side? She abandoned her family when we need her most. She has responsibilities. Ma'am, adults are allowed to move out of their parents' homes. That's not a crime, Officer Ramirez interjected calmly. If you find evidence of actual theft, you can follow up with the Millfield Police Department. But please be aware that filing false police reports is a serious offense. After the call ended, the officers advised me to document everything and keep all receipts and proof of ownership easily accessible. They left their cards in case I needed to contact them again. As soon as they were gone, I collapsed onto the sofa, shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. My own mother had called the police on me with false accusations, all to try to force me to return home. I called Audrey immediately. "Mom called the police on me," I said when she answered. "What? No way." She told them I stole a laptop and jewelry. Audrey's growl of frustration came through clearly. "That's insane. Wait, let me check something." I heard her footsteps as she moved through the house. The family laptop is right here on the desk, where it always is. And what jewelry is she talking about? You never wore any except Grandma's necklace. She's making it up to try to get me to come back. This is a new low even for her, Audrey said grimly. Don't worry if the police contact me, I'll tell them exactly what's yours and what isn't. I spent the rest of the day unpacking and trying to calm down enough to prepare for my first day at the bookstore tomorrow. Just as I was feeling more settled, another knock came at the door. It was a different pair of police officers. Nancy Wilson asked a stern-looking woman with cropped blonde hair. "I'm Detective Phillips, and this is Officer Morales. We're here about a report of child endangerment and abandonment." My mouth fell open in shock. "What?" "Your mother has filed a report claiming you abandoned minor children in your care, putting them at risk." I invited them in, my hands trembling with anger now rather than fear. "That is absolutely false. I was never the legal guardian of any of my siblings. My mother and stepfather are their parents and guardians. I lived at home and helped care for them, but I'm their sister, not their parent or legal caretaker." Detective Phillips studied me carefully. "According to the report, you were the primary caregiver and left without ensuring proper care was in place. My mother and stepfather are fully capable of caring for their own children. They chose to rely on me instead because it was convenient for them. But legally and morally, they are the responsible parties." I explained the entire situation again this time, with even more detail about the years I'd spent as an unpaid nanny while trying to build my own life. Officer Morales seemed particularly sympathetic. "So you're 23, moved out of your parents' home to start your own life, and now they're trying to use the legal system to force you to return?" "Exactly. They never paid me for childcare. There was never any formal arrangement. I just gradually took on more and more responsibility because they abdicated theirs." Detective Phillips took extensive notes. "We'll need to involve social services to verify the children are being properly cared for. But from what you're describing, this doesn't sound like abandonment on your part." The next day, I met with a social worker named Susan Chen, who had been assigned to investigate the case. She was a petite woman with a no-nonsense demeanor but kind eyes. "I've already spoken with your mother, stepfather, and some of the older children," she told me as we sat in a small conference room at the social services office. "I'm just trying to get a complete picture of the situation." I told her my story from the beginning, my father's death, my mother's remarriage, the gradual shift of parental responsibilities onto my shoulders, and finally my decision to leave. Susan nodded thoughtfully throughout. "This is unfortunately not an uncommon pattern. A parentified child finally sets boundaries and the actual parents panic because their support system is collapsing." "Are the kids okay?" I asked anxiously. "They're fine. Your sister Audrey is quite mature and seems to be stepping up in your absence. And contrary to what your mother claimed, your stepfather is perfectly capable of parenting when required to do so." She smiled slightly. "It's amazing how adults can rise to the occasion when they no longer have someone to take advantage of." Susan advised me to document all interactions with my family going forward. "Your mother seems determined to force you to return. She may continue to use legal channels to harass you. I'd recommend consulting with a lawyer about a cease and desist letter if the police visits continue." Over the next few days, I learned from Audrey that Mom had been telling everyone in Millfield that I had abandoned the family in their time of need, stolen valuable items, and left the children without care. Most people knew our family dynamics well enough to be skeptical, but some had bought into her narrative. She posted this long dramatic thing on Facebook about ingratitude and betrayal Audrey told me during our nightly call. Without naming you directly, but everyone knows who she's talking about. That's just great, I muttered. How are the kids doing? Better than you'd expect, actually. Frank is actually packing lunches and driving them to school. I think he realized Mom was going to have a complete breakdown if he didn't step up. And get this, he hired a housekeeper to come 3 times a week. I laughed in disbelief. Seriously, all these years I was doing it for free, and now he's willing to pay someone. Exactly. It's infuriating, but also kind of vindicating, right? Proves they could have done this all along. The next blow came when Paula called me at Kimberly's apartment sounding concerned. Nancy, I received a strange call today asking about your employment. A woman claiming to be from a background check service, but the questions she was asking seemed off. My heart sank. Let me guess. She wanted to know if I had a criminal record or history of abandoning responsibilities. Something like that. I told her you're one of the most responsible young women I've ever met, and that was the end of it. Is everything okay? I explained the situation, mortified that my mother was now trying to interfere with my employment. Don't worry, Paula assured me. Your job is secure. I'm a pretty good judge of character, and I know you're dealing with a difficult family situation. My grandmother Marie called to say she was driving up from Florida to see me. Your mother called me in tears claiming you'd stolen family heirlooms and abandoned the children. I knew immediately it was nonsense. When she arrived 2 days later, she took one look at my tired face and pulled me into a fierce hug. You did the right thing, sweetheart. It's long overdue. With her support and Kimberly's, I began to feel stronger. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in family law who advised me on protecting myself from further harassment. He drafted a cease and desist letter to my mother warning that continued false reports to authorities could result in legal consequences for her. But what about my siblings? I asked anxiously. I still want to see them. We can work on establishing a visitation schedule once things calm down, he assured me. Right now the priority is stopping the harassment. My anger, which had been buried beneath guilt and worry, began to surface. I had sacrificed my youth to raise my mother's children, and her response to my independence was to try to destroy my new life. The more I thought about it, the more resolved I became to stand my ground. My first day at Wonderland Books was exactly what I needed. The small, cozy store with its towering shelves and reading nooks immediately felt like home. Paula gave me a tour, introduced me to the other employees, and spent the day training me on their inventory system. You're a natural, she said, as I helped a customer find the perfect gift for her nephew. I'm so glad you changed your mind about the job. For the first time in years, I was doing work I loved without simultaneously monitoring children, planning meals, or handling household crises. When my shift ended at 5, I actually had free time. The concept was so foreign, it took me a while to figure out what to do with it. Kimberly suggested we celebrate my first day with dinner at a local restaurant. Welcome to normal 20-something life, she said, raising her glass in a toast, where you work a reasonable number of hours and then get to have a social life. I wouldn't know what a social life looks like, I admitted. Well, you're about to find out. True to her word, Kimberly introduced me to her friends, took me to local events, and encouraged me to enroll in evening classes at the community college. I registered for 2 education courses that would start in the spring semester just 8 weeks away. Gradually, I established a routine, working at the bookstore during the day, having dinner with Kimberly, or exploring Atlanta in the evenings and weekends spent settling into my new life. The cease and desist letter had stopped the police visits, though my mother continued to send manipulative text messages, which I mostly ignored. Audrey set up weekly video calls so I could talk to the younger kids. Jackson was still a bit angry, but warmed up when I showed him around my new workplace via video. Hazel chattered about her dance classes, and Ruby showed me her drawings and blew kisses at the screen. The calls were bittersweet, but they assured me the kids were doing okay without my daily presence. 3 weeks after I left, Frank called me. Nancy, I owe you an apology, he said, his voice uncharacteristically humble. I was so surprised I couldn't speak for a moment. You do? Yes. I didn't realize how much you were doing around here until you were gone. Your mother and I. We took advantage of your generosity. I see that now. Thank you for acknowledging that I said carefully. I've hired a part-time nanny to help with the younger kids after school, and I'm coming home earlier from work. He paused. Your mother is still pretty upset, but she'll come around eventually. As if on cue, Mom started calling me daily, oscillating between tearful pleas and angry accusations. She hit a new low when she called to tell me she was having pregnancy complications. The doctor says it's stress-induced, she sobbed. The stress of you leaving and abandoning us. I felt a stab of guilt but held firm. I'm sorry you're having a difficult pregnancy, Mom, but I'm not responsible for your health issues. Can't you at least come home on weekends to help? Just until I'm feeling better? I considered it briefly. I could come for a day on weekends to help out, I offered as a compromise, but I'd be there as a visitor, not moving back. A day, that's hardly any help at all, she snapped, her tone changing instantly from pitiful to irritated. Never mind, don't bother. Her manipulations became so transparent that they began to lose their power over me. With each passing week in Atlanta, my confidence grew. I excelled at my job, made new friends, and even started going on occasional dates, including with James, a literature professor who frequented the bookstore. You have an old soul, he told me over coffee one afternoon. There's a depth to you that's unusual for someone your age. That happens when you raise 6 children before your 24th birthday, I replied with a wry smile. He laughed, then grew serious. What you did took incredible courage. Standing up for yourself that way? His admiration was a stark contrast to my mother's portrayal of me as selfish and irresponsible. It helped reinforce that I had made the right choice. 6 weeks after I'd left home, Travis's 15th birthday arrived. I had promised to visit for the celebration, my first time returning to Millfield since my departure. Audrey had assured me that Mom had agreed to behave civilly, but my stomach was still in knots as I drove the familiar route home. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, but the energy inside was noticeably different. Frank greeted me at the door with an awkward handshake while the younger kids swarmed me with hugs. Mom remained in the kitchen, ostensibly busy with birthday preparations. When we finally came face to face, her pregnancy was visibly showing. She gave me a stiff nod. Nancy. Hi, Mom. How are you feeling? As well as can be expected, given everything. Her tone was pointed, but she refrained from outright hostility. The party was tense but manageable. Travis seemed genuinely happy to have me there, proudly showing me his latest computer build. The younger kids clung to me, especially Ruby, who kept crawling into my lap at every opportunity. After cake, several extended family members cornered me in the living room, clearly having heard only my mother's version of events. Family should stick together through thick and thin. Aunt Patricia lectured, wagging her finger at me. I took a deep breath and calmly laid out the facts. I'm 23 years old. I raised 6 children that weren't mine for over a decade, without pay or recognition. I sacrificed my education and early career to be an unpaid nanny. I love my siblings, but I deserve to have my own life. I pulled out my phone and showed them a spreadsheet I'd created, documenting the thousands of hours of childcare I'd provided, and even estimates of what that care would have cost if my mother had paid a professional. Aunt Julia, my father's sister, who had always been kind to me, examined the numbers with widening eyes. I had no idea it was this extensive, Nancy. I knew you helped out, but this is essentially a full-time job. Plus school and your library position, plus cooking, cleaning, and household management, I added quietly. By the end of the conversation, several family members were looking at the situation very differently. I noticed my mother watching from the doorway, her expression a mixture of anger and embarrassment as she realized her narrative was being challenged. That evening, as I was preparing to drive back to Atlanta, Audrey pulled me aside. Mom's been intercepting your mail, she whispered. I found a stack of letters in her dresser drawer when I was looking for scissors. College acceptance letters from years ago, scholarship offers. She hid them from you. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I had applied to several colleges during my senior year of high school, but heard back from only a few. My mother had told me I wasn't accepted to the others. To discover she had deliberately sabotaged my future to keep me at home as free childcare was devastating. Are you sure? I asked, my voice barely audible. Audrey nodded grimly. I took photos of them with my phone. I'll send them to you. I drove back to Atlanta in a daze alternating between fury and grief. The next morning, when Audrey's photos arrived, showing acceptance letters from Georgia State University and the University of Georgia, both with substantial scholarship offers, I finally allowed myself to cry for all the opportunities I had lost. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Travis. I told Mom what she did was unforgivable, he said, his teenage voice cracking with emotion. Hiding your college letters like that, we had a huge fight. Travis, you didn't need to do that. Yes, I did. Someone needed to tell her the truth. She's been playing the victim, but she's the one who took advantage of you for years. He paused. I told her I'm moving to Atlanta to live with you after I graduate high school. If you'll have me. His loyalty brought fresh tears to my eyes. Of course I will, but that's still over 3 years away. A lot can change. Not my mind, not about this. The Millers, our next-door neighbors who had watched me grow up and take on increasing responsibility for my siblings, reached out via email. We always saw what was happening, Mrs. Miller wrote. We should have said something, offered more help. You were just a child yourself when you started raising those children. We're proud of you for finally putting yourself first. Their validation meant more than they could know. For so long, I had accepted my mother's framing that my caretaking role was normal and expected. Hearing from multiple sources that it was neither helped solidify my resolve. 2 months after I left home, my mother finally requested a family meeting with a therapist present. Dr. Thompson, a family counselor in Millfield, mediated as we sat stiffly in her office, my mother and Frank on one sofa, me on another. Nancy has expressed that she felt taken advantage of in her role within the family. Dr. Thompson summarized after I had explained my perspective. Diane, Frank. How do you respond to that? Mom shifted uncomfortably, one hand on her growing belly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're a family. Everyone pitches in. My mother helped raise me and my siblings. I expected the same from Nancy. There's a difference between helping out and being the primary caregiver, Dr. Thompson pointed out gently. From what Nancy has described and what the younger children confirmed when I spoke with them, she was essentially functioning as a third parent from a very young age. Frank cleared his throat. I think we got comfortable with the arrangement. It worked for us, and we didn't stop to consider if it was fair to Nancy. Mom shot him a betrayed look. Whose side are you on? This isn't about sides, Dr. Thompson interjected. It's about acknowledging everyone's experience and finding a way forward that respects all family members' needs. After nearly 2 hours of difficult conversation, we established some ground rules. I would visit 1 weekend day per month and speak to the younger children by video call weekly. I would not be expected to provide childcare during visits unless I offered. Mom would respect my independence and stop trying to guilt me into returning home. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The following weekend, Jackson and Hazel came to visit me in Atlanta. I showed them around the city, took them to the Georgia Aquarium, and let them help out at the bookstore for an hour. Seeing their excitement at experiencing my new life helped ease my lingering guilt. Your apartment is small, Jackson observed as he bounced on my bed. Yes, but it's mine, I replied with a smile, and I only have to clean up after myself. Do you miss us? Hazel asked, her eyes serious beneath her bangs. Every single day, I told her honestly. But I'm happier now, and that means I can be a better big sister to you. Sometimes we have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others. As winter turned to spring, my mother's attitude gradually shifted from outright hostility to grudging acceptance. She would never fully understand or approve of my choice, but she had stopped actively trying to sabotage my new life. Frank surprisingly had become an ally of sorts, often running interference when Mom started slipping into manipulative behaviors. By the time the holiday season approached, I had been in Atlanta for 8 months. I had completed my first semester of college courses with straight A's, received a promotion at the bookstore, and moved into my own small studio apartment. James and I were dating exclusively, and I had a circle of friends who knew nothing about my unusual family history until I chose to share it. I was for the first time in my life thriving on my own terms. 1 year after my dramatic departure from Millfield, my life in Atlanta had transformed completely. I had been promoted to general manager at Wonderland Books, with Paula mentoring me on the business aspects of running a successful independent bookstore. My education was progressing steadily with a 4.0 GPA in my business and education courses. I was on track to complete my associate degree within the next year, with plans to transfer to a 4-year university afterward. My relationship with James had deepened into something meaningful and supportive. Unlike the boys I'd briefly dated in high school who had quickly become frustrated with my limited availability due to family responsibilities, James respected my independence and ambition. "You know what you want and you're not afraid to work for it," he told me. "That's incredibly attractive." My mother had given birth to Henry, my newest half-brother, 3 months earlier. True to my word, I visited once a month, but on my terms. I enjoyed spending quality time with my siblings without the burden of being their primary caretaker. Our relationships had evolved into something healthier, more like normal sibling bonds. I had recently moved into a slightly larger 1-bedroom apartment that I could comfortably afford on my manager's salary. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, decorated exactly as I wanted with secondhand furniture I'd refinished myself and walls lined with bookshelves. When I hosted a small apartment warming party, my siblings came with Frank, while Mom stayed home with the baby. "This place is so you," Audrey said as she helped me arrange a veggie tray for my guests. Now 18, she was in her senior year of high school and applying to colleges with my enthusiastic guidance. "Have you heard back from UGA yet?" I asked, knowing she was anxious about admissions. "Not yet, but I'm trying to be patient." She lowered her voice. "Mom's already started with the guilt trips about me going away to school." "Ignore her," I advised. "This is your future. You deserve the same chance I missed out on." Travis, now 16, had joined us in the kitchen. "I meant what I said last year. When I graduate, I'm moving to Atlanta. Maybe even sooner if Mom keeps trying to make me the new you." I smiled at his determination. "You know you're always welcome, but let's try to make sure you finish high school in one place. Moving in the middle of senior year would be tough." Jackson, Hazel, and Ruby were exploring my apartment with the excitement of children discovering a new playground. To them, my small 1-bedroom seemed like an adventure so different from the chaotic family home they knew. "Nancy, can I live here too?" Ruby asked, climbing onto a bar stool at my kitchen counter. At 5, she was still the baby of the family, though. Henry had now taken that official title. "When you're older, you can come visit for longer," I promised. "Maybe even for a whole week during summer vacation." Her face lit up at the prospect. "Really? Without Mom and Dad?" "If they agree, yes." The change in my siblings was remarkable. Instead of seeing me as a third parent, they now viewed me as the cool older sister who had her own place in the city. Our time together had more quality and less quantity, focused on having fun and building genuine connections, rather than me supervising and caretaking. My relationship with my mother had evolved too, though it would never be what it once was. The discovery of the hidden college acceptance letters had created a breach of trust that couldn't be fully repaired. But we had reached a détente of sorts, communicating mainly about the children and keeping things civil. Frank had surprised everyone by stepping up as a father. The shock of my departure had forced him to take a hard look at his disengagement from family life. He now coached Jackson's soccer team, attended Hazel's dance recitals, and read to Ruby at bedtime, all things he had previously left to me. "It's exhausting," he admitted when we spoke privately during one of my visits. "I had no idea how much you were handling. I'm sorry we took you for granted for so long." The hired help they had initially scrambled to find had evolved into a stable arrangement: a part-time nanny who came after school 3 days a week, and a housekeeper who handled the deep cleaning twice a month. My mother had complained about the expense initially, but Frank had stood firm. "This is what it costs to raise a family without exploiting your oldest daughter," he'd told her bluntly. My grandmother Marie visited me regularly in Atlanta, proud of the life I was building. "Your father would be so proud of you," she told me during her last visit. "He always wanted you to chase your dreams." I had started seeing a therapist to work through the complex emotions of my unusual upbringing. Dr. Bennett helped me process the anger I felt toward my mother without letting it consume me, and to establish healthy boundaries without crippling guilt. "What you experienced was a form of parentification," she explained during one session. when a child is forced to take on adult responsibilities and parental roles. It's a form of role reversal that can have lasting psychological effects. Understanding that what had happened to me had a name, that it was a recognized phenomenon rather than just my unique family dysfunction, was oddly comforting. It helped me recognize that my feelings of resentment and my need for independence were normal and justified. I had learned to say no without guilt, to prioritize my own needs without constant worry about others, and to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation and dependency. These were skills many people developed naturally in their teens, but I had come to them later through a more difficult path. During Henry's baptism, which I attended as a gesture of goodwill, my mother pulled me aside during the reception. "You look well," she said, studying my face. "Atlanta seems to agree with you." "It does," I replied cautiously, unused to non-manipulative conversation from her. She adjusted Henry in her arms, looking down at his sleeping face. "I've been thinking a lot about what Dr. Thompson said in our family sessions, about how I expected things from you that weren't fair to ask of a child." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I still don't fully understand why you couldn't stay and help with your family, but I'm trying to accept that you needed to go." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my mother it was significant progress. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I do still care about all of you. I just needed to care about myself too." She nodded slowly. "Frank says, I've been blind to how much I depended on you, that I've been doing the same thing to Audrey since you left. She deserves a chance at college and a normal young adulthood," I said firmly. "I know." She sighed, bouncing Henry gently as he stirred. "Things are different this time. I have more help and Frank is more involved. We'll manage without putting it all on Audrey." I didn't fully trust her words, which was why I'd been so proactive in helping Audrey with college applications and encouraging her independence. But I appreciated the acknowledgement, however, limited of past mistakes. Later that week, Audrey called me, her voice excited. "I got in UGA with a partial scholarship just like you did." "That's amazing," I exclaimed. "I'm so proud of you. Have you told Mom and Frank?" "Not yet. I wanted you to know first." She paused. "Mom's going to freak out." "Probably," I agreed, "but this time she can't hide the acceptance letter, and you have me to back you up." "I couldn't have done this without you showing me it was possible to break free," she said softly. "You're the reason I even applied." Her words touched me deeply. By claiming my own independence, I had opened the door for Audrey to do the same. Instead of perpetuating the cycle of exploitation, I had disrupted it. During one of my regular conversations with Susan, the social worker who had been assigned to our case during my mother's false allegations, she mentioned something that put everything in perspective. "You know, I see this pattern all the time," she said. The oldest daughter becomes a third parent, sacrificing her own development for her siblings. It's particularly common in families where the mother had her first child very young, like your mother did with you. "So I'm not unique," I said with a small laugh. "Not at all. But what is less common is having the courage to break the pattern. Most young women in your position continue the sacrifice until they're well into adulthood, often repeating the pattern with their own children." She smiled warmly. "You should be proud of yourself for recognizing the dysfunction and choosing a different path." As I approach my second year of independence, I've found a balance that works for our unusual family. I'm present in my siblings' lives without being consumed by their needs. I'm building a future that honors my own dreams, while still maintaining connections to the people I love. I've learned that caring for others and caring for yourself aren't mutually exclusive, but they must exist in balance. My mother and I will likely never have the close relationship some mothers and daughters enjoy. Too much water under that bridge, too many years of exploitation, that she still doesn't fully acknowledge. But we've found a way to coexist peacefully, united by our love for the children who connect us. The most important lesson I've learned through this journey is that self-respect must come before self-sacrifice. Without valuing ourselves, our sacrifices for others become hollow gestures that breed resentment rather than love. True generosity comes from a place of fullness, not depletion. In our last video call, I watched all 6 of my siblings crowd around the screen, vying for my attention, sharing their news and achievements. Their faces were happy, healthy, secure. They were thriving without my daily presence, and so was I. That perhaps is the greatest validation that I made the right choice. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that others criticized but you knew was right for you? How did you find the courage to stand your ground? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in challenging situations. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest growth. Thank you for watching, and I hope my journey inspires you to honor your own needs while still caring for those you love.